Please, close your eyes for just a moment. Try to remember the heavy metallic sound of a 3-kopeck coin dropping into the slot of a red street soda machine. Or perhaps, remember the sharp, unforgettable smell of smoldering autumn leaves burning right in the middle of your neighborhood courtyard. Welcome back to our shared past. Today, we are going to take a long, warm walk down memory lane to look at 20 everyday habits from the 1970s and 1980s in the Soviet Union. Back then, these routines were absolutely normal parts of our daily lives, but today, if you try to do them, you would face severe fines, absolute public outrage, or you would discover that they are completely illegal under modern safety and sanitary laws. We are going to uncover the lost rituals of a generation that grew up without fear. And make sure to stay with me until the very end, because the final habit we will discuss reveals the most touching and profound difference about how we used to live, a kind of trust that modern society has completely forgotten. Time seemed to flow much slower back in those days. We lived without the constant nervous buzzing of mobile phones, without instant messaging, and without the endless flood of modern news. Our world was entirely analog. Waiting was a natural, beautiful part of life. We waited weeks for a handwritten letter to arrive in the metal mailbox. We waited all week just to watch a 15-minute cartoon on a Sunday morning. There is a common modern myth that because we lacked advanced technology and because store shelves were often empty, our lives must have been grey and emotionally poor. But the exact opposite is true. Because we had fewer material distractions, our emotional lives were incredibly rich. Our joy was found in genuine, face-to-face human connection. People looked each other directly in the eyes. Neighbors knew each other by name, and the entire courtyard acted as one large, extended family. We shared what little we had, we trusted complete strangers, and we navigated a physical world that was rough, unpolished, and completely free of the sterile safety barriers that define modern life. Let us take a slow walk back in time and remember the bright red sparkling water machines that stood on almost every busy street corner. Close your eyes and you can almost hear the heavy, satisfying clunk of a 3-kopeck coin dropping into the metal slot. But the most incredible part, something that would cause absolute panic and immediate sanitary bans today, was the single, shared faceted glass resting on the small metal grate. Everyone used the exact same glass, from factory workers with oil on their hands to young mothers, from school children to elderly pensioners. You would take this heavy, damp glass, press it upside down onto the special washing nozzle, and a weak fountain of cold water would rinse it for a second or two. That was our entire disinfection process. And then you would fill it to the brim with sweet pear or tarragon syrup water, drinking deeply on a hot July afternoon. Nobody ever got sick, nobody ever complained, and no one ever thought of stealing that simple glass. Today, drinking from a communal cup in the middle of a bustling city is entirely illegal by health codes and completely unthinkable. But back then, it was a symbol of our absolute, unspoken trust in our fellow citizens. And now let us remember how our parents sent us to the local grocery store when we were barely 5 or 6 years old. Today, letting a child of kindergarten age walk alone across busy streets with cash in their pockets would likely result in visits from social services and serious legal trouble. But in the 1980s, it was the proudest rite of passage. Mother would hand you a string bag, which we called an avoska, and a few crumpled paper rubles or heavy coins. Your mission was crucial. You had to buy a loaf of dark rye bread and a bottle of milk. The milk came in heavy glass bottles with colored foil caps, and you had to carry them so carefully so they would not cling together and break. The bread was never wrapped in plastic. It rested on wooden shelves and you tested its freshness with a special metal fork tied to a string. The journey home was the best part. The smell of that warm, freshly baked crust was absolutely irresistible. You would bite off the crunchy end, completely ruining the perfect shape of the loaf, chewing happily all the way home. No adult worried that you would be kidnapped or get lost. The entire neighborhood watched over you, and the streets felt as safe as your own living room. Now let us turn to the ways our mothers and grandmothers treated our winter colds, using methods that modern doctors would probably report as physical abuse. Whenever you caught a chill, out came the dreaded medical cupping glasses, known to everyone simply as banki. It looked like a medieval ritual. Your mother would take a long metal tweezers, wrap cotton wool around the end, dip it in strong medical alcohol, and light it on fire. With quick, terrifying movements, she would thrust the burning torch into the small glass jar to burn out the oxygen, and then slam the hot glass directly onto your bare back. The glass would instantly suck your skin up into a tight, dark purple dome. You had to lie perfectly still under a heavy wool blanket for 20 minutes while these glass domes pulled at your skin. When they were finally removed with a sharp popping sound, your back was covered in perfectly round, dark bruises that lasted for a week. Today, this practice is banned in modern pediatric medicine due to the risk of severe burns and tissue damage. But back then, we firmly believed it was the only reliable way to pull a deep cough out of our lungs, and we wore those purple circles at the public bathhouse like badges of honor. Let us think about the incredibly dangerous materials we played with as children, completely unsupervised in our courtyards. Today, environmental protection agencies and child safety laws strictly prohibit minors from handling toxic heavy metals. But in our childhood, melting lead was one of the most exciting outdoor activities for boys. We would hunt through junkyards, garage cooperatives, or abandoned construction sites looking for old broken car batteries. Armed with heavy stones, we would smash these acid-leaking plastic boxes wide open just to extract the precious dark grey lead plates hidden inside. We built small bonfires right in the dirt, placed the lead into an empty tin can, and watched in absolute fascination as the solid metal melted down into a beautiful, shimmering liquid silver. Then came the creative part. We would pour this highly toxic, boiling liquid metal into handmade molds, carved out of wet sand, earth or clay, to create heavy homemade knuckles, toy soldiers or fishing weights. The toxic fumes we inhaled, the danger of severe burns, and the heavy metal poisoning were completely unknown concepts to us. We were simply happy artisans, creating our own treasures out of urban waste. And speaking of childhood games, try to imagine explaining our favorite pastime to a modern school teacher or a police officer today. Picture a group of 8-year-old boys standing in a circle in the neighborhood playground, taking turns forcefully throwing sharp, heavy pocket knives directly into the dirt between their feet. This was the legendary game of knives, or nožičky. Today, carrying a folding blade onto a playground or schoolyard is a serious criminal offense, leading to immediate expulsion and police involvement. But in the 1970s and 80s, almost every boy carried a folding knife in his pocket. It was an essential tool for cutting bread, sharpening wooden sticks, or playing this beloved game. We would draw a large circle in the damp soil, dividing it into imaginary countries. The goal was to flip the knife from your hand, your elbow, or even your nose, making the blade stick perfectly straight into the ground of your opponent's territory, allowing you to slice off a piece of their land. We spent hours perfecting our throwing techniques, laughing and shouting, surrounded by flying steel. Miraculously, serious injuries were incredibly rare, and adults casually walked by without ever raising a single concern. Let us recall the incredible level of security, or rather, the beautiful lack of it, that defined our home lives. In the modern world, our apartments are protected by heavy steel doors, complex alarm systems, digital cameras, and multiple deadbolts. Leaving your home unsecured today is practically an invitation for a robbery. But in the Soviet era, our approach to home security was wonderfully naive and completely illegal by today's home insurance standards. When we left for school or when our parents went to work, we rarely carried house keys with us. Instead, we performed a simple, universal ritual. We would lock the wooden front door, take the heavy metal key, and just slide it straight under the thin rubber doormat. If the doormat was missing, we might leave it inside the letterbox on a long string, or even tucked behind the doorframe. Everyone knew where the key was hidden. Any thief could simply lift the mat and walk right into our home. But the truth is, nobody ever did. Our neighbors were our security system. We trusted the people living in our stairwell like our own family. The key under the mat was not just a convenience, it was a profound symbol of a society where fear of each other simply did not exist. Let us travel out onto the open roads of our memories. Today, standing on the side of a highway and getting into a car with a complete stranger is considered incredibly dangerous. And in many places, hitchhiking is entirely banned by traffic laws. Modern parents teach their children to never, ever accept rides from people they do not know. But things were vastly different several decades ago. Traveling by passing cars or catching a poputka was an absolutely normal, everyday method of transportation for students, workers, and even young women traveling alone. You would simply stand by the edge of the road and raise your hand. The drivers who stopped were not expecting money, they usually just wanted someone to talk to during a long journey. You would climb into the passenger seat of a dusty Volga or a loud heavy truck, and within 10 minutes you were sharing life stories, political jokes and sandwiches with a person you had never met before in your life. There was no fear, no checking of license plates and no mobile phones to track your location. It was an era of profound mutual aid, where the unwritten law of the road was that you always helped a fellow traveler in need. Now, let us remember a culinary habit from our childhood that would undoubtedly send a modern toxicologist into a state of absolute shock. Today, children have access to endless varieties of colorful, artificially flavored bubblegum. But in our time, real chewing gum was a rare and expensive luxury, often brought in by foreign travelers or bought on the illegal black market. So we found our own, incredibly hazardous substitute right on the streets. We chewed solid construction tar, which we called goudron. Whenever we saw workers laying new asphalt on the roads or repairing the flat roofs of our apartment blocks, we would eagerly wait for them to leave their heavy barrels of black, sticky tar unattended. We would chip off solid black pieces, dust off the dirt, and start chewing. At first it tasted terribly bitter and crumbled into sharp little pieces in your mouth. But if you chewed long enough, it turned into a firm, black, rubbery mass. It turned our teeth completely grey and tasted heavily of petroleum and hot asphalt. Today, consuming industrial petrochemicals is naturally a severe health hazard. But for us, that black piece of tar was our prized possession, chewed proudly for hours. Let us drift back to our school days and the massive, organized campaigns to collect scrap metal. Today, sending hundreds of unsupervised children to wander through industrial zones, active railway tracks and abandoned factories to drag heavy, rusted metal objects through the streets would be a severe violation of child labor and safety laws. But back then, the collection of metalolom was a sacred duty for every pioneer. Twice a year, our teachers would announce a competition between the classes. We would form teams and scour the neighborhood like little scavengers. We dragged incredibly heavy cast iron pipes, rusted car parts, broken radiators, and sometimes even functional metal fences that we quietly dismantled in the dark. Our small hands were covered in rust, dirt and scratches, completely unprotected by gloves. We would pile massive mountains of jagged, rusty steel right in the middle of the schoolyard. The physical strain on our young backs was immense, and the risk of tetanus from rusty nails was high. But we were driven by the glorious promise of a paper certificate and the deep patriotic pride of knowing our rusty treasures would be melted down to build new tractors for the country. Now, let us imagine the shock of a modern traffic police officer if they witnessed our typical summer transportation methods. Today, strict seatbelt laws, heavy fines, and mandatory child car seats are the absolute rule of the road. Transporting people in the open back of a cargo truck is strictly illegal almost everywhere. But in the 1970s and 80s, especially during the harvest season or summer camps, this was the standard way to travel. A battered old farm truck would pull up and 20 people, adults and small children alike, would climb right into the wooden cargo bed. There were no seats, no safety harnesses and no soft padding. We sat directly on wooden benches or just on the dusty wooden floor, holding onto the rattling sideboards as the truck bounced violently over deeply rutted dirt roads. The wind whipped through our hair, mixing with the strong smell of diesel exhaust and the sweet scent of summer fields. We would sing loud pioneer songs together, bouncing uncontrollably with every pothole, laughing when someone fell over onto their neighbor. It was highly unsafe by modern standards, but it was also a sensation of pure, unadulterated freedom that modern children will never truly understand. Let us remember the dangerous chemistry experiments we conducted in the stairwells of our apartment buildings. Making explosive devices or smoke bombs today is a serious crime that will bring the police to your door in minutes. But we were all amateur pyrotechnics thanks to a highly flammable plastic called celluloid. We knew exactly which household items were made of this magical material, mostly old dolls, soap boxes, and those classic green geometric rulers we used in math class. We would break these rulers into tiny pieces, wrap them tightly in several layers of thick foil or an old newspaper, and leave a tiny opening at one end. With a single strike of a match, we would light the plastic and quickly stamp out the open flame. The celluloid would instantly begin to smolder, producing thick, blinding, incredibly pungent white smoke. We would toss our homemade dymovucha down the stairwell or into the school corridor and run away as fast as our legs could carry us. The smell of that burning plastic was intensely toxic, and the fire hazard was immense. Yet this dangerous chemical hooliganism was simply considered a normal, albeit mischievous part of growing up in our vibrant courtyards. And where did we spend our free time when we were not making smoke bombs? Let us wander back into the absolute best playgrounds of our youth, the active construction sites. Today, construction areas are surrounded by high metal fences, warning signs, security cameras and guards. Trespassing is completely illegal and highly dangerous. But in our time, every growing residential district was one giant open playground of concrete and mud. As soon as the workers left for the day, the local children immediately invaded. We ran across narrow concrete slabs suspended stories above the ground with no safety nets. We jumped into deep foundation pits, played hide-and-seek in half-built basements filled with stagnant water, and fought epic battles using pieces of hard insulation foam as shields. We climbed rusty tower cranes if the cabin was left unlocked, feeling like kings of the neighborhood looking down at the world. Broken glass, exposed steel rebar, and deep holes were everywhere. Yet we navigated these hazardous concrete jungles with the agility of cats. Our parents had no idea where we were, and we returned home after dark, covered head to toe in grey cement dust, and completely happy. Let us turn our eyes upwards and remember a visual staple of our neighborhoods that many modern city codes have completely banned today. If you look at modern apartment buildings, they are neat, uniform, and often have strict rules against hanging anything outside your balcony. But back then, doing the laundry was a highly public, communal event. Because nobody owned mechanical tumble dryers, every single courtyard was crisscrossed with long, heavy ropes tied between large wooden poles or directly to the trees. On weekends, the entire neighborhood's private life was put on public display. Huge white linen bedsheets, heavy cotton shirts, and children's woolen tights flapped in the wind like the sails of a great ship. In the winter, the wet clothes would instantly freeze into solid planks of ice, and mothers would carry these stiff, frozen sheets back inside, filling the apartment with the incredible, sharp scent of winter frost. Even between balconies high above the streets, intricate pulley systems carried wet clothes out over the heads of pedestrians. Today, this beautiful, chaotic display of domestic life is considered an eyesore or a safety hazard. But it gave our courtyards a soul and a lived-in warmth. Now, let us quench our thirst with a memory that makes modern health inspectors pale with horror. The arrival of the yellow class barrel on our street was the true beginning of summer. A small truck would tow this massive, yellow metal tank onto the pavement, and a stout woman in a white apron would immediately set up her small stool. Today, selling fermented beverages from an unpasteurized, unchilled street barrel into shared, unwashed containers is completely illegal under food safety laws. But we formed huge lines for it. The seller had a single heavy glass mug and a smaller half-liter mug. Just like the soda machines, she rinsed them by pressing them down onto a tiny water jet for half a second, before handing the dripping glass to the next customer in line. But many of us preferred to bring our own containers. We would bring heavy enameled bidons, small tin buckets with loose lids, and ask her to fill them to the very top. The dark brown bubbling kvass was rich, sharp, and perfectly cold. We would walk home swinging the heavy bucket, secretly taking large gulps right from the rim, leaving sticky foam on our upper lips. Totally unconcerned about bacteria or expiration dates. Let us breathe in the most nostalgic scent of our autumns. A scent that is now completely outlawed in almost every major city. When October arrived and the golden leaves fell from the old poplar and maple trees, the yard keepers, whom we called dvorniki, would rake them into massive dry mountains. And then, right in the middle of the residential courtyards, they would set them on fire. Today, burning organic waste in urban areas is strictly illegal due to air pollution laws, fire hazards, and the release of toxic smoke. But back then, the thick, grey, fragrant smoke filled the entire neighborhood. It was the absolute perfume of our childhood autumns. We children would gather around these smoldering piles. We threw long wooden sticks into the embers to make torches, and if we were lucky enough to have them, we would bury raw potatoes deep into the hot grey ashes. Waiting for those potatoes to bake took what felt like hours. When we finally dug them out, they were completely black and charred on the outside. We would peel back the hot, bitter skin, burning our freezing fingers, to eat the soft, starchy center, covering our faces in black soot and smiling through the wonderful autumn smoke. Now, let us remember how our fathers acted as amateur electricians, using methods that would undoubtedly void any modern home insurance policy and violate every fire safety code. In the old apartments, the electrical panels were fitted with small ceramic fuses. Whenever someone turned on the heavy electric iron at the same time as the television, the weak system would overload, a loud pop would echo in the hallway, and the whole apartment would plunge into total darkness. Buying new fuses was often difficult, so our fathers used a brilliant, highly dangerous illegal trick. They would take the burnt-out ceramic fuse, find a thin piece of copper wire, and wrap it around the metal contacts to bypass the safety mechanism. We called this homemade copper bridge a żuczok, or a little bug. Today, any electrician will tell you that doing this creates a massive risk of an electrical fire, as the wire will not break when the system overheats. But in the 1970s, millions of apartments were lit up thanks to these dangerous little copper bugs. It was a time when men fixed everything themselves, with whatever materials they had on hand, completely ignoring the invisible dangers hidden within the walls. Let us dive into the waters of our summer vacations. Today, city authorities place large red warning signs around urban ponds, rivers and flooded quarries, strictly prohibiting swimming due to high bacteria levels, industrial runoff and underwater hazards. Ignoring these bans can result in heavy fines. But in our youth, if a body of water was deep enough to jump into, it was an official swimming pool. We swam in city rivers right downstream from massive, smoking factories. We bathed in local ponds where ducks swam and stray dogs cooled off. The water was often murky, filled with sharp stones, broken glass and tangled weeds, but we did not care. We would spend the entire day diving off concrete embankments or rusty metal pipes that discharged mysterious warm water into the river. Our lips would turn completely blue from the cold, and we would lay flat on the hot asphalt to warm our shivering bodies before jumping right back in. We never heard of skin infections or waterborne diseases. We were simply forces of nature, completely merging with the rough, unpolished urban environment around us, totally free from the protective, sanitary bubbles that surround children today. Let us reflect on a social habit that has undergone a complete revolution. If you look at old photographs or watch movies from our youth, you will notice a thick cloud of smoke hanging over almost every scene. Today, smoking is heavily restricted, completely banned in restaurants, airplanes, trains and near playgrounds. But in the 1980s, it was the absolute norm. People smoked cheap, unfiltered cigarettes everywhere, all the time. Fathers smoked in the kitchen while holding their newborn babies. People smoked in the closed cabins of airplanes, filling the small space with a thick grey haze. They smoked furiously in the corridors of hospitals, in university classrooms, and inside crowded commuter trains. The smell of cheap tobacco mixed with cheap cologne was the standard scent of any adult man. Today, exposing children to second-hand smoke is considered highly irresponsible and legally restricted. But back then, non-smokers simply endured it silently, accepting the dense clouds of smoke as an unavoidable part of breathing the air. The world was less healthy, surely, but it was also a world that did not constantly police the personal habits of its citizens. Now, let us recall a truly bizarre urban phenomenon that modern city residents would find absolutely shocking and highly illegal. Towards the end of the 1980s, during the times of severe food shortages, ordinary city dwellers began to turn their small apartment balconies into miniature, high-rise farms. Today, keeping livestock in a residential city apartment violates dozens of sanitary, zoning and animal cruelty laws. But back then, it was a desperate act of survival. People would bring live chickens and sometimes even small pigs up the elevators into their tiny concrete apartments. The balconies were enclosed with whatever glass or wood people could find, turning into smelly, noisy agricultural zones on the 9th floor of a building. You could wake up in a modern, concrete residential district and hear the loud crowing of a rooster coming from your neighbor's balcony. The smell was often unbearable, and the noise was constant. Yet nobody called the police or the health inspectors. Neighbors understood the harsh reality of empty store shelves. This surreal blend of urban living and rural farming was a testament to our incredible resilience and our ability to adapt to anything. Finally, let us talk about the greatest, most profound difference of all, the complete and total independence of children. Today, parents can track their child's smartphone via satellite, and leaving a young child outside unsupervised all day is considered legal neglect. But in our childhood, the moment we woke up on a summer weekend, we would run out the door, yelling to our parents that we were going for a walk. We had no phones, no watches, and absolutely no adult supervision. The only rule was to come home when the streetlights turned on, or when your mother leaned out the window and shouted your name across the entire courtyard. We wandered miles away from home, exploring deep forests, abandoned railway tracks, and distant neighborhoods. We resolved our own conflicts, scraped our knees, and learned how to survive and negotiate on our own. Our parents simply trusted that the world was generally safe, and that the collective eyes of the neighborhood grandmothers sitting on the benches would watch over us. This incredible, absolute freedom to explore the world without a digital leash is perhaps the most precious and impossible thing to recreate in the modern world. As we look back at all these banned habits, we realize a profound truth. We do not actually miss the toxic tar, the rusty metal, or the dangerous lack of safety regulations. What we deeply miss is our youth, our energy, and the beautiful, unspoken trust that held our society together. We miss the feeling of a world where neighbors were family, where children ran free until sunset, and where a shared glass of water on a hot street corner was a symbol of absolute equality and community. We miss the feeling of being intimately connected to the physical world and to each other, without barriers or constant fear. If this journey back in time brought warmth to your heart, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video to help keep our history alive. And now, I want to ask you, which of these 20 habits do you remember the most? Did you ever chew construction tar? Or perhaps you left your apartment key under the doormat for everyone to see? Please, share your personal memories in the comments below. Let us remember together.